It's GarbAugust, baby. My country may be heading towards the crapper, but don't panic. Read trash. Everything will be okay. Hello, welcome to my channel. Another Boobiephile reads Playboy for the articles. I am Greg, and for the fourth year in a row, I am a co-host for GarbAugust, the greatest BookTube event of the year. This event was created by that evil mastermind, CriminOlly, to help people celebrate reading the kinds of books that maybe your high school teacher or your college professor would frown upon, but you enjoy reading it anyway. These don't necessarily mean they're bad books by calling them trash. It is sort of a badge of honor saying that they're the underappreciated literature that people enjoy reading. And you will get many definitions across the co-hosts of GarbAugust on what exactly trashy books mean. But you know something? Just go for the books that you want to read and don't pay any attention to your high school teacher or your college professor. So, this is called GarbAugust 4, the final chapter. But much like the movie Friday the 13th, the part 4, the final chapter, I doubt this will be the final chapter for GarbAugust. I am sure it will continue. I want to encourage everyone to take a look in the description of my video to get a whole list of all the naughty co-hosts who are part of GarbAugust 4 this year. We're all great, and we all have naughty names when we celebrate GarbAugust. There are prompts, which I will list in the description of this video. There is a Garbingo card where you can check off different types of trashy books if you want to read them. As a co-host, I'm going rogue. I'm not really following the prompts that closely. I'm not following the bingo card. And I've pretty much decided to not read the group read for GarbAugust. That would have been Zoo by James Patterson and some other dude, or the sequel to Rivals by Jilly Cooper. I'm probably not going to read any of those two group reads because, as I said, I'm going rogue. I'm just reading the trashy books that I want to read. Now, I'm a little bit late in making my GarbAugust video. I should technically or possibly be making a GarbAugust video every week, but I've been lazy. So let me tell you about the trashy books that I've been reading for August 2025. First book that I finished was The Hell Candidate by Graham Masterton. It was originally written under the pseudonym Luke Short and published in 1980. Graham Masterton is a British horror author, but he wrote this novel about the American presidential campaign of the 1980s. And to be honest, it's not a very good book. Graham Masterton let it go out of print because the story is about a candidate for the president of the United States who makes a deal with the devil. And of course, making the deal with the devil leads to some bad outcomes. And the reason Graham Masterton brought it back into print in 2016 is that there were some eerie similarities between his fictional president running for the United States, or the fictional character running for president, and Donald Trump. Purely accidental because this book was published in 1980 and Trump was elected in 2016. Or no, he started to serve as presidency in 2016. But the similarities are there, and they're eerie. Kind of funny. I wish the book had been better, but my main criticism, even bringing this out and trying to relate this to the Donald Trump bandwagon, is the devil is a smart guy, and he would never make any sort of deal with Donald Trump. The devil would not deal with someone that stupid. But all in all, if you find it used in a bookstore, I believe the pseudonym was Luke Short, go ahead and buy it just to say that you have it. I read mine on my Kindle, And I can say, I'm not happy that I read it. I'm not really sad that I read it. It's just one of those books that pass you by in the night like a ship. The next book I finished was Lights Out by Novella Allen, a dark romantic stalker novel. I read this because I saw a few other people review it, and I was curious. I have never read this type of book before. And to be honest, I kind of enjoyed it. It is a very naughty, explicit book with lots of detailed sex scenes. I did do a review of this book all on its own, and I will put a link in the description of my video. But if you like your romance, dark and creepy, and have a bits of the mafia, this book might be for you. But as I said in my previous video, it is very sexually explicit. Every year for GarbAugust, I read a killer animal novel. I'm not sure why I do it that way, but I do. A lot of killer animal books really aren't very good. You have The Rats by James Herbert, which is fantastic. You have The Slugs by Sean Hudson, which is fantastic. And you have a few other good to mediocre killer animal novels. But this one, The Cats by Nick Sherman, does not make it into that mediocre category. It falls just shy of mediocre, and I will say it's a disappointing book. It is the story of a laboratory somewhere in London that is experimenting on cats. And let's just say this experiment goes haywire and turns the cats into vicious killer animals. Now you think a sweet little putty tat wouldn't be that dangerous, but if you know cats, cats can be actually strong and their claws are really just tiny scimitars. The cats in this book really don't amount to much of a threat. The characters in this book, well, I guess it technically has characters. They have names, they do things, but they don't feel like real people. The writing is rather bland and pedestrian, and the ending was ho-hum. So I cannot recommend The Cats by Nick Sherman, but Screamin' CriminOlly says there is a description in this book where one of the characters is driving down a road, and he lived on that road where the character is driving down. I don't know where that house is. I'm sure Screamin' CriminOlly is not going to tell me. And to be honest, I don't need to know where he lived as a child. But if you like killer animal books, you're safe skipping this one. If you see it at a used bookstore, I would probably pick it up anyway if the price is right, because just owning a whole bunch of killer animal books is maybe the point in me reading them anyway. The Doll Who Ate His Mother by Ramsey Campbell. Ramsey Campbell is one of the most respected horror writers around today. This one was written in the 70s. It is his first novel, and it does have that first novel feel to it. I got the impression that Ramsey Campbell had a lot of great ideas, a lot of aspirations to be a writer, and he threw this book together, but it just didn't gel. He did not have full control of his medium or his characters. The writing's good enough. He shows that he's going to be the good writer that he is, but the story and the characters just didn't mesh together. In essence, this is a story that starts off with a brother and sister in an automobile. They're driving home late at night, and there is an accident, and the sister is driving. The brother is killed, and someone steals an arm from her brother's body. It then becomes a search for who stole this arm and why. At this point, it's more of a detective novel than a horror novel. You only get the horror elements well past the halfway point, and they're subtle. They're not necessarily supernatural horror, but more of a mystical horror. There is let's just say, a priest that practices, let's just say voodoo, even though I don't think it was actually called voodoo in this book, but you get the point. It just did not hold together as a novel. even though Ramsey Campbell became one of the most famous and respected horror authors of this time. Nick Carter, Run, Spy, Run, the first in the Killmaster series. Every year for GarbAugust, I also read a Nick Carter novel. These are espionage novels that usually have a lot of spicy scenes in them. Nick Carter is actually the main character of this novel and also listed as the author. So you know Nick Carter is a pseudonym. There were a number of different authors who wrote in this series. Nick Carter character is also revived from a character that I believe began in the late 19th century under a very different format. And I was kind of excited when I found this in a used bookstore because Run Spy Run is the first in this revised Nick Carter series. And I've read 5 other ones in this series. And I have to say that this one has been the most disappointing one that I've read so far. The spicy scenes, which are kind of humorous in some of the other books, just aren't as spicy in this book. It's as if the publisher was saying, let's hold back. And maybe somewhere between book 2 and book 4, somewhere where I start up, they decided to throw in a little more spice because the people who will read this book when it was first published were almost certainly all men, and you know men like their spicy sex scenes in their espionage novels. I do, as a whole, like the Nick Carter series. They are very dated. I believe this one was published in the 60s, and it shows. But if you see some of these at a used bookstore and you want to give them a try, go ahead. They are numbered now in the hundreds or the 200s or maybe even higher. I've only read the books published or read in the first 30 published. I've not read any of the newer ones, so I don't know what they're like. But these ones that are published in the 60s and 70s, with the exception of Run Spy Run, are usually a lot of fun. A number of months ago, I was looking through my YouTube feed, and they had a woman whose job it was to narrate spicy romance novels. She narrated the audiobooks, and she narrated a fragment of a lesbian romance. And the scene that she described and narrated was just so absolutely hilarious that I decided I was going to check out her books on Audible. I did check them out, and I decided not to get any of her spicy romance novels, but I did find a different book on Audible. It was called Goblin Breeder by Mickey Carey. This is written for a man. It is a harem novel. A harem novel is a subgenre of fantasy and erotica. This is where there is a main male character who has lots of adoring female characters, and they all hop into bed and have sex at one time. And this is a fantasy because it is about an army ranger who gets transported to this fantasy land, and there is this breed of humanoids called goblins. They are essentially 5 feet tall, or 4 feet to 5 feet tall, green humanoids with pointy ears. There is an evil wizard who lives in this land, and he has made all the male goblins impotent and sterile through magic. So one of the goblin wizards summons this man from our world into the goblin world, and his main task is going to be breeding and impregnating the goblin women. And let's just say the goblin women are so excited to have this exciting, virile man to have sex with them. And one of the naughtier bits, and this one is pretty naughty and pretty explicit in his sex, describes how the goblin women, as I said, are between 4 feet and 5 feet tall, and this man who's brought to Earth is about 6 feet tall. So he's a big, strong man, and it is implied that the male goblin's male parts are not as large as a normal human's male parts. So all the goblin girls are, ooh, it's so big. And honestly, that is the kind of attitude and writing that you will experience in Goblin reader. It feels to me like the author could very well be an incel living in his mother's basement, writing about the sexual exploits of a man who basically has unlimited sexual opportunities with these goblin girls. And the man is hoping that maybe that will lead him to a real girl in real life. Good luck, incel. Now, I don't know anything about the author. He could be a perfectly normal male. He could be married. He could have a number of children. And he's just writing this sort of harem lit just for fun, just so that other incel males in this world can get their titillation. And as a bit of writing, it's really rather poor. The characterization is really rather poor. The story, there is a bit of more story than just having sex with the goblin girls, because of course this human male from the world, he's an army ranger, has decided it's his duty to go kill this evil wizard who has made all the goblin males impotent and sterile. And all the goblin males are really excited to have this hero going out to kill this wizard, and they're also really excited that he's impregnating their ladies. As I said, it's really rather bizarre and not very good. I did buy the omnibus edition, which is about 3,000 pages worth of text. I believe there's 5 or 6 books in the series. I only read the first book, Goblin Breeder, and I'm stopping there. I don't need to read more about a man having unlimited sex with his harem of goblin girls, especially since the writing isn't really very good. Torment by Hank Janson, originally published in the 50s. This is a part of a much larger Hank Janson series. Again, the author on the cover is listed as Hank Janson, and the main character is also Hank Janson. Now, as I understand it, the first 20, 30 books in this series were written by one author, and was later taken over by other authors. And he was a British man, and he wrote what they call British gangster dramas set in the United States. This book sets place in Chicago, and it is about this reporter. His name is Hank Janson. He goes to see a show where he meets an old friend and a beautiful lady assistant, and they claim to know how to do telepathy. And Hank Janson, being a good journalist, decides to challenge them because his friend said she actually is telepathic. It's all real. So he creates this scheme where he's going to test this lady, her telepathic ability. He goes to her, I believe it's on like a Tuesday night, and he says, "Tell me what the headline will be on Saturday." And the lady thinks about it, writes it down, and then he seals it up and puts it in the office safe of his newspaper to open on Saturday after the headlines have been revealed, thereby proving, does she have pure telepathic abilities and able to predict the future, or is she just a fraud? A few chapters, or say the next chapter, the man approaches Hank Janson and says, "You can't do this. She's a fraud. I was lying when I told you she could really read the future and have telepathic abilities. It's all a fraud." And that sets up a story. That's not the main story. But the main story involves something else, a different crime. A man is caught breaking into a graveyard, apparently with grave digging equipment. And he is, of course, arrested, and he's going to be charged with attempted grave robbing. But he also has a stack of photographs, naughty photographs. And of course, this grave robber, Monkey, says those photographs have nothing to do with me. So Hank Janson must solve this crime, but it does relate back to that first story I told you about the fraud, because the author does bring these two stories together in a satisfying resolution, although the stories do not connect directly. There are 17 titles available on Kindle in the Hank Janson series. If you go look in print for used copies, there are a lot more. After finishing Torment by Hank Janson, which is the first in the digital series, I went out and bought the second copy in the series because I really liked the book. It's a lot of fun. I'll probably read it before next GarbAugust. It was that good. I also wanted to go out on a limb and try something a little bit different. From Audible, I downloaded Minotaur, Milk, and Honey, a sweet and steamy Minotaur romance for adults by J.J. Rhimes. This is a romance novel which is available for free if you are an Audible member. It is narrated by virtual voice, and what that means is it's a computer reading the text back to you, not a human being. It is really rather static, having this female computer voice read to you, but the computer does the job well enough for this short story, because it is really just a short story. It is 1 hour long, and in the story, there is a female baker, a curvy 28-year-old, and she owns her own bakery, but she's having some financial trouble, so she answers an ad in the paper for an assistant, and it's on a farm, and it says Minotaurs abound, or something like that, and she thinks that's a typo. But lo and behold, there are Minotaurs running this farm. And then afterwards, of course, this is a romance novel or a romance short story. This is an erotic short story, so let's just say that the lady and the Minotaur get naked together and have a lot of fun. But there's more to it. It does build up the romance story, saying how this human woman, who the Minotaur calls Tiny, can form a bond. And then there are the bankers that are going to foreclose on the lady's bakery, and the banker who also wants to shut down this Minotaur's honey farm. Let's just say they're going to get the best of the bankers. Is it a good story? No, not really. Is the sex really steamy? No, not really. But I guess it has its place. It's only 1 hour long. I listened to it on my morning walk, the complete story, start to finish. Would I read anything else by J.J. Rhimes? I doubt it. Will I get more erotic short stories narrated by virtual voice? Maybe someday, maybe next GarbAugust, if I want to say I've read an erotic short story. I'll download another one. But honestly, the virtual voice isn't really that satisfying. And the story itself, this Minotaur, Milk, and Honey, again, wasn't very satisfying. So that is my first half of August, what I read for GarbAugust 4, the final chapter. Thank you for watching, and keep on reading trashy books and stories.